Sarah, I'd like to start back in 2011 when the US finally killed Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. We all remember the TV pictures, the Navy SEALs going in and the helicopters. Um, but bringing it back up to date, has drone warfare changed that scenario?
What makes this strike now in 2022 different is, of course, that it's being done with a drone rather than special forces. And what also is very interesting is that it was then Vice President Biden who did not support the raid in 2011 and then authorized the use of this Reaper drone to target this number two of Al-Qaeda just over the weekend.
And talk to me about this Reaper drone. What does it look like?
So the US has been using Reaper armed drones now for probably a little bit more than a decade. And it's used them to conduct counterterrorism strikes in Pakistan, in Somalia, in Yemen. And so this is what it used. But what makes this different from previous Reaper strikes is that typically the US would use Hellfire missiles and a standard type of Hellfire missile. And the reports coming out from the weekend strike are that it used what has been referred to as a ninja bomb. And this was specially designed R9X Hellfire missile that does not have explosives, but has six knives that shred the targets rather than detonate with explosives. And the idea there is to minimize collateral damage and to focus on the target rather than the potential civilians around them.
And in terms of the payload these Reaper drones carry, is it normally Hellfire missiles or is it a mix of explosives?
No, it would normally be Hellfire missiles. And if you look at a typical drone strike that would use Hellfire missiles, you would see considerable collateral damage around the target. And that's what makes this strike so remarkable, is that it really was pinpoint and precise, targeting only this part of the balcony where the target was and nothing around him.
And I guess this is a game changer for the US and in fact other people around the world that you can now neutralize people without civilian casualties.
So, for people who have been critical of the collateral damage problem with these drone strikes, I think this really addresses that concern because it focuses and is so restricted to the target rather than any of the potential civilians around them, which, as we knew from following, or as the US knew from following his what we've referred to as pattern of life since April, it was pretty clear that every morning he would be out by himself. So there weren't a number of people around him, but even still, the ability to target just that part of the balcony and leave everything intact is remarkable.
He seems like quite an astute man in the fact that, as you said, he was always on the balcony, but he never left the house, did he, once he got into Kabul?
Hmm. No, it's fascinating to look at kind of what now we knew about his day-to-day life since April. So he had not been in Kabul until the Taliban had retaken control of the country, and he seems to have become almost complacent. Where he was living was not far from the British embassy, in kind of a leafy residential neighborhood, quite posh. But he sort of maintained a sense, some reservation, nonetheless, that he wouldn't leave his house, but yet he would go outside every day. And so he was becoming kind of more comfortable, but not comfortable enough to leave his home.
Talk to us about the intelligence behind this operation. We know that it's been going on for months and months. Do we think that the Taliban have got fed up with Al-Qaeda in their country? Do you think there's been some collusions between them and the Americans?
I would not go so far as to think that there's been collusion, but I would say that he has, since 2000, the 2000 strike of the USS Cole off the Middle East, he has been a target of the United States. And then he was involved with planning the 9/11 attacks. And then there was a high profile attack that killed several CIA agents a few years ago. So I think it's fair to say that he has been a real priority for the American intelligence community since 2000. So this is more than 2 decades that the US has been in pursuit of him.
So, in terms of President Biden, with his army, and military officials in the Situation Room, once the decision has been made to try and take him out, what's the process? How does it go from there?
So from the reports that are coming out, it seems as though he approved the strike on July 25th. And, thereafter it could happen any day. And it happened several days later. And I think what the intelligence community would be looking for is the predictability that he's on the balcony at the time he is, that he's not with someone else, that the weather is good. So all of these conditions must have presented on Sunday, and that's when they went in and conducted the strike.
And in terms of these Predator drones, what's the range of them?
So in this case, it appears to have been a Reaper drone, but same sort of idea. The range is not, it's, we no longer have bases in Afghanistan. The US doesn't have bases in the region. And so I haven't seen reporting thus far that indicates where this Reaper would have come from, but it probably would have had to fly a considerable distance to reach Afghanistan before dropping these Hellfire missiles.
And in terms of legal ramifications here, the Americans think it's justified to take him out. In international law, is there any comeback here for the Americans, or is it job done, they'll move on?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and that's something that there's been a lot of debate on over the last 20 years as the US has conducted a series of these armed drone strikes in various countries, Pakistan, Somalia, Yemen. I think this one will be a little bit less controversial just because it was very clear that he was a key part of planning the 9/11 attacks. What makes it a little bit sort of surprising is that he's not a young man, and he doesn't appear to be actively planning attacks. So it seems as though this was more retribution for his involvement in previous attacks than some imminent high threat target who's actively involved in planning future attacks.